Good morning. Sorry I'm a little bit late. Had to fix the coffee pot. So happy Saturday. I was at the Brewers game yesterday. Brewers managed to win the first game against Atlanta. Thanks to the people at Williams and McCarthy for the tickets. We got to sit in the 11th row. So Wisconsin has got three major sports franchises that get MVPs and are incredibly successful, and they're all in unbelievably small markets. How do they do that? So the Green Bay Packers are in a city of a couple 100,000 people. For those of you that are near my area, Green Bay is not much bigger than Rockford. And yet they have a thriving professional franchise. One of the top professional franchises in terms of notability with its identity, with its marketing and sales with regards to its product. So how does that happen? And then now you've got the Milwaukee Bucks, national or world champions with the MVP, and the Brewers have had the National League MVP. In fact, you had the MVP of all three leagues in Wisconsin at one time, and the Brewers have made the playoffs 4 years in a row. They've made it to the National League Finals, lost to the Dodgers, who ended up winning the World Series, and who knows if the Brewers are going to win the World Series or make it. But right now they're favored to beat Atlanta. Dodgers are favored to beat San Francisco, and then the Brewers are favored to beat the Dodgers. How does all that happen? Well, with the Packers, it was a long tradition, right? They started out winning a lot of titles back when the game was old, back before you had the Super Bowl, and then they fell on very hard times. In fact, the franchise was thinking about leaving Green Bay. They were playing half of their games in Milwaukee. And, they're the only team that's owned by the fans. They're the only sports franchise that's owned by the fans. So a new GM got brought in, and he decided he wanted to make them a perennial competitor and a Super Bowl winner again. So he looked and he said, we got to change the way that we play the game. And the team that was having the most success was San Francisco with Joe Montana. And so he hired away one of their top assistant coaches, Mike Holmgren, and said, you need to bring the West Coast offense to Green Bay. And Holmgren said, well, if I'm going to bring the West Coast offense to Green Bay, then I'm going to need Brett Favre. So they traded everything they had to Atlanta and got Brett Favre, and the rest is history. That started a whole new franchise for Green Bay. Obviously, Brett had tremendous success. Then we went to Aaron Rodgers. There's been Super Bowl appearances. There's been Super Bowl victory. But it was all started by the vision of one person who said it was time to make this franchise a contender again. Then with the Milwaukee Bucks, and then they set out on a plan, and then that leader's plan filtered down through everybody else. And now that franchise is hugely successful, and it was a franchise on the brink. The Milwaukee Bucks, Herb Cole, Senator Cole, when he owned the Bucks, he got them close. They got to the Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7, lost to Philadelphia back in the late 90s. It was a great run with Ray Allen and Sam Cassell. But then the way that the NBA worked changed. The NBA kind of became where it was run by the players. And all these teams that were winning the NBA Finals were these super teams. And it was always, a team in a city where the top players wanted to be. And the top players never wanted to be in Milwaukee. So the franchise started to slump. And in fact, we had 1 year where we only won 14 games through the entire year. So the Senator sells the team, and a new guy buys the team, a hedge fund manager out of New York. And he says, we're going to make this team a world champion. He set out with that intention. So first he goes, we got to have a new stadium. So as part of buying it from Herb Cole, because Herb had the connections in Milwaukee, he said, you got to build me a new stadium. So they did. And then they built this whole corridor. And then he realized, the only way for us to do this is we've got to get somebody who wants to play in Milwaukee. We got to get the best player in the league who wants to play in Milwaukee. So we got to draft and then hope that works out. So they took a shot on this young kid who then turns out to be the best player in the league, and he wants to stay in Milwaukee. But again, they knew what they wanted. We want to win a world championship and be a perennial contender in Milwaukee. We're not going to be able to trade to get the teams the way everybody else does it. So we're going to have to draft, and we're going to have to draft a kid that we show so much loyalty to that he may want to stay in Milwaukee. And that seemed impossible at the time. And that's exactly what happened. The visionary at Green Bay said, we need to bring a different type of football to Green Bay and bring this franchise back from the brink. Found the person to do it, empowered that person with the same vision, and the rest is history. Then you got the Brewers. Bud Selig owned the Brewers forever, brought them to Milwaukee, had a team that went to the World Series, didn't win, but got a new stadium built, then became the commissioner of baseball and kind of forgot about the franchise. So he sells it to the new owner who does the same thing. He comes in and he says, I want this franchise to be a perennial contender. I want this franchise to make it to the World Series and to win a World Series. They haven't made it to the World Series yet. They haven't won one yet, but I bet you they do. So he says, how does a small market do that? Remember, baseball is the only market where they don't kind of divide up everything. In football, the money is all divided, and the losers get to draft first. So there's a real parity in the league. Same is true in basketball. The losers get to draft first. In baseball, it doesn't work that way. There's no parity in the league. There's a reason that the Yankees can buy everybody else's best players is because they're in the biggest market, so they got the most money. So when he came to Milwaukee, he said, okay, well, who's the small market franchise that's successful? Well, it's St. Louis. St. Louis is unbelievably successful in a small market franchise. How do they do it? They grow their own players. So he said, okay, that's what we got to do. We got to grow our own players. And what wins championships? Pitching and defense. Who always had the best pitchers in Major League Baseball? The Yankees. Why? Because they bought them. Who's got the best pitchers in baseball now? The Milwaukee Brewers. And where'd they get them? They grew them. They grew them so they recruited the kids out of high school, they developed them in their farm leagues, and they home grew all of these great pitchers and these great players. But it started out with a vision of one guy who said, this is how we're going to do it. So then he hired a kid from Milwaukee who was a great player, Greg Counsell, who manages differently, by the way. When he was managing and taking his team to the National League Conference Finals, he was ridiculed. A-Rod kept saying how terrible he was and how he's going to do, well, you put all your faith you want in that guy, how terrible he was doing and how this idea that he was doing was such a bad idea, how he used multiple different pitchers throughout the game. He'd use pitchers for only a couple of innings. Well, that's because he needed to save his people, and he needed to use them often, and he understood that. But they also got a chance to get a great player who was going to be happy in Milwaukee, Chris Yelich. Tampa Bay was giving him away for nothing, and the Brewers went and got him. Sent the private jet, put Robin Yount and Paul Molitor on the jet to show him how much they wanted him to be in Milwaukee. The same type of thing they did with Giannis at the Bucks. They took care of his entire family, not just the player. They showed him that in a small market, you can be part of a family as opposed to in a bigger market where, you're part of a family but a little bit more of a commodity. The point of all of this is the leaders of these organizations had visions, and they were able to empower the vision to everybody else. They had specificity. It was time-driven. They knew exactly what they wanted, and then they communicated that to everyone, and it's filtered down, and now you have franchises that are incredibly successful. It didn't happen by accident. They had a plan. They had a plan of what they were going to do and how they were going to execute it. They got a little bit lucky, but, as Abraham Lincoln said, I believe in luck, and I find the harder I work, the luckier I get. Have a great Saturday, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. We're all in this together. Let's take care of each other.